The things I want to talk to you about, and by the way, I consider myself like a very left-leaning, classical, progressive person. And it's confusing because growing up, the left was always the party of free speech, I felt like. I always felt like I was on the right side of social issues. But as time has progressed since I finished college, more and more I feel alienated by my own like political identity. And
Yeah,
I find
right.
myself more in terms of free speech, like yeah, like you said, the people on the right are the ones that invite you. And so
Well,
I,
and
I'm,
lots
I'm
of
confused. I think a lot of people feel the same way who grew up like classical progressives, but feeling alienated from their own political home. I feel like I have no identity anymore. I don't know, I don't know where I stand on which party to identify with.
well, that's exactly the same thing that Joe Rogan told me the last time I talked to him. And
When you hit me up, I mean, when we did that original podcast, your podcast, I
Yeah.
was like, is this a thing? Like, are we vibing right now?
Right.
And and then after that, we covered the Gamba stuff, and I was like,
Gamble.
okay, we're vibing.
Yeah.
We're vibing pretty hard.
I've covered a lot of content creators as part of my like internet history series I've been doing. And in many of them, we've been talking about the political evolutions of people. And I guess that can be weird because they often do it in front of our eyes on YouTube throughout the years. So I've done The Amazing Atheist and I've done Hunter Avalone as well. But today, another person I want to talk about is Ethan Klein from H3H3. Now, I was thinking about doing Ethan and Hila Klein, but if you watch through their content, Ethan talks far more and he articulates his political positions a lot more like as an individual than she often does, but she's going to feature in the video too. So what we're going to do here is look back at the early content, their early political views, people they used to associate with, people they platformed, what changed them, why did they start talking more about politics, why did they start taking a more progressive stance on politics, and then talk about, of course, you guys will probably have seen, their new collaboration, Ethan specifically, with Hasan Piker. And just to clarify before I start, I've known who these guys are for a while. I'm not like their biggest fan, so I will probably leave out stuff that you guys will think I shouldn't have left out. I just can't help that because when you have watched someone on and off for years and years, and then you go back to look at their content through this new like political analysis sort of angle, you kind of forget things. So please let me know in the comments if I leave anything out and what you guys think I should have covered that I didn't. Now, before we get any further, I'm going to plug my social media and Patreon for about a minute. Timestamps in the description, so skip this if you're not interested. Before we get any further, a lot of my work on this channel is demonetized because when you're covering more serious, sometimes edgier topics, YouTube doesn't like this. So if you've ever enjoyed my work, please consider becoming a patron. And you don't have to pledge a crazy amount. I want to build up my Patreon based on as many people as possible, pledging little amounts like $1 or $2. So if you feel like I have ever brought anything that's worthwhile into your life and my content, please really consider becoming a patron to help me continue to do this regardless of if YouTube monetize or not most of my videos in a given month. Also, if you want to join our communities, come check out our Discord and my subreddit. Those links in the description. And if you want to follow me personally, please check out the Kavernacle at Twitter, at Instagram, and also my personal Reddit where you can keep up to date with all my content and what I'm doing. It's been a massive grind trying to get to 45, but please help me get the new chocolate orange. We are really close. For every 5k, we get a new orange. I want 2 more by the end of this year. I also live stream 2 times a week. I've been really enjoying it lately. A lot of you guys have been interested. That's on a Tuesday and on a Thursday. And if you miss them, it's archived on the Kavernacle Extra. Now, H3H3 Productions primarily was a comedy channel, or I guess sort of like a commentary channel as well. This kind of old style of content that has kind of faded a bit in terms of just like criticizing other YouTubers, talking about YouTube drama. So they didn't really talk about politics back then. And I guess the world of like 2015, 16, 17 YouTube is politics weren't as important because as you will see, these guys collab with people that you think might be pretty problematic. So PewDiePie, JonTron, they're actually really good friends with. Hila Klein actually worked for JonTron. And other people like Joey Salads and Jordan Peterson all coming on their podcast to various degrees of scrutiny. But I thought what would be a good starting point is this one video in October 2016 where Ethan addresses some backlash they got to a prank that they reacted to by Joey Salads, where he went into, I think, an African-American neighborhood with an All Lives Matter sign. I like this video in the sense that it gives you the vibe of what their politics were, at least the politics they were presenting on YouTube.
Yesterday we made the mistake of almost talking about politics, and we basically triggered so many people. I was actually shocked. This time we spoke about the Black Lives Matter and a Joey Salads experiment, but when it's something as politically charged as a race and Black Lives Matter, it's really f***ed up. We never expressed an opinion. We never expressed support for Black Lives Matter. Yet, if you look at the comments, they are insane. We made a video making fun of crazy feminists, and all the people on the left were coming and calling us Trump supporters, that we were a haven for the alt-right, and we're unsubbing and getting triggered. And here's my point. Each side hates each other so much that they're so clouded by hate and judgment that nobody listens. In both of those videos, we never even expressed any opinion about either side. This show is about rational thought. It's about cutting through the bull, whether you're on the left or the right. This is not a politically affiliated show, and it never has been. We're about cutting through the bullshit. In this climate, it's like, you can't say anything anymore. Each side, the left and right, see each other as the devil. Not as like human beings with compassion and people who are worth listening to and trying to understand. Because Joey Salads faked an experiment and they couldn't even handle the thought of us not absolutely blasting Black Lives Matter. We didn't say a word of support. But the fact that we didn't blast them was enough for them to unsub, downvote the video. You're welcome to hate Black Lives Matter. I don't like a lot of the shit they do either. But you want to base your beliefs on a fake social experiment? At least if you want to hate Black Lives Matter, which is perfectly fine. God bless you. Do it on something real. Okay? Go find a real reason.
So basically frames himself as this guy in the center. You know, you have the radical left who get mad at them for stuff. You get the radical right who get mad at them for stuff. But, you know, people like him are just in the middle trying to cut through all the nonsense and give you like real takes. And I do find it interesting. He doesn't come out in support of Black Lives Matter at all in this video. He says he has a lot of problems with them and everything like that. So that's an interesting thing to remember right there. And what he reminds me of is a lot of these people at the time who thought like if you hated Trump, you were too extreme. If you liked Hillary, you were too extreme. And by the way, this guy did vote for Hillary Clinton. And it just feels like there was a lot of people at the time who felt like, you know, both sides had gone too far. And obviously I find the framing a bit ridiculous considering, you know, I don't think the mainstream left in America is even gone far at all. But around this time, they also started their podcast. This is at a time when we had the adpocalypse caused by their pal PewDiePie. And they sort of set up this podcast as a way to like, you know, change it up, change the content, maybe find something more stable to monetize. Now, I've made a whole video about my problems with civil podcasts, essentially friendly chats with a variety of people across like the political spectrum or various different backgrounds, which often act as just promotion for the person themselves, which can be all fine and good when you're talking about like maybe like fitness influencers. But when it comes to someone like Jordan Peterson, who I've outlined numerous times, that through his rabid anti-leftism, he usually, you know, aligns himself with the hard right, sometimes the far right, and pushes conspiracy theories that the far right often love, like the cultural Marxism conspiracy, which he kind of like even built a lot of his career on. Now, H3H3 didn't just get him on once, they got him on twice in less than a year, so seems like they pretty much like this guy. And it's the first interview specifically I want to talk about the most, so that's the 3rd of November. And why this is important, because even though Ethan Klein doesn't speak a lot about his political positions in a lot of these videos before, here he is with Jordan Peterson talking about what his problems are with the left specifically.
And most of the people I've talked to have been conservative. But the reason for that is they're the ones who ask me to talk. Like, I'm perfectly willing to. I actually did a talk in Vancouver about a year ago now called A Left-Wing Case for Freedom of Speech. You know, because you can make a very strong left-wing case for freedom of speech. In fact, a stronger case, I would say, in some sense, because to the degree that the left historically has genuinely been about allowing the working class a voice, which I think is classical democratic socialism, which has a very long tradition in Canada, then it's freedom of speech that's absolutely crucial for that. And so it's very straightforward matter to make a left-wing case for free speech. That's generally who makes the case for free speech.
That's one of the things I want to talk to you about. And by the way, I consider myself like a very left-leaning, classical, progressive person. And it's confusing because growing up, the left was always the party of free speech, I felt like. I always felt like I was on the right side of social issues. But as time has progressed since I finished college, more and more I feel alienated by my own like political identity.
Yeah,
and I find myself more in terms of free speech, like you said, the people on the right are the ones that invite you. And so I'm confused. I think a lot of people feel the same way who grew up like classical progressives, but feeling alienated from their own political home. I feel like I have no identity anymore. I don't know. I don't know where I stand on which party to identify with.
Well, that's exactly the same thing that Joe Rogan told me the last time I talked to him. And my brother-in-law as well is a very, very smart guy. He said like he feels that his political affiliation has moved away from him.
So at the end of 2017, this was recorded, Ethan thinks the left are leaving him behind. He's politically homeless. A lot of centrist types like to say this stuff. Loads of people said it under Corbyn with Labour, like, I'm politically homeless now because I'm not radical left and I don't want to shut down free debate and free speech. So I feel like the left is leaving me behind. But of course, what I think like he's referring to is this caricature of the left who just want to like censor everyone and shut down free speech and everything like that, which is something Jordan Peterson, of course, has used throughout a lot of his recent career, that the left are hysterical, the left cannot be reasoned with, and they're not civil at all. And their sort of groupthink, wrongthink, all this stuff will lead us to the totalitarianism of Stalin's Russia. But essentially what this podcast acts as for Peterson is just, a pulpit to spout off everything he says, because he's hardly challenged by Ethan Klein. And in actuality, Ethan Klein actually agrees with a lot of what he says, specifically about the left being the one shutting down free speech. Now, Ethan and Hila Klein must have liked him so much, they invited him back in February 2018, a couple months after his first one, for another interview. And in this interview, Jordan Peterson explains, the interview he had, the infamous one on Channel 4, and Ethan Klein essentially just, praises about how well he did in that interview.
I wanted to ask you about the now infamous interview that I'm sure everybody's seen by
Channel
now.
4.
With Channel 4. If you guys haven't seen it, it's terrific. Give it a watch. It's just Jordan Peterson interview Channel 4. It'll show up. It's got like over 5 million views now. The reporter was extremely confrontational. And I think the clip was so powerful because how calmly and skillfully you parried each of her verbal attacks. And, well, first of all, I'm wondering, did you anticipate that interview to be conducted like that? Were you expecting that kind of combativeness?
No. I'm in a clinical situation here. I'm not in the real world. I see. So
is that
I'm a
what you
different
thought
person.
when that first happened? You're like, oh my God.
I thought, oh yes, I understand. It's like, I see. I'm not where I thought I was.
Was that part of the reason why you were able to stay so cool and calm and collected?
Yeah, because I was just watching. Now, and I wasn't perfectly cool and collected either, because she did set me on edge. It was
good, though.
It was,
quite
yeah,
good.
it was
quite good.
It was good enough.
All things considered.
All things considered.
Yeah.
That's right. All things considered, it was good enough.
You know what? You really dominated that situation, and they owned it.
See, I don't think they knew that.
You think that after that, they're like, that was great. Let's put it
Well,
on.
I kind of know that because I had some communication afterwards through various channels to find out. Yeah.
So the vibe I'm getting of Ethan Klein's politics is that he was fairly progressive, but he was an anti-SJW. So he thought there was this SJW movement just taking over all leftist spaces and really becoming a distraction where they'd focus on, culture war stuff that didn't matter in, Jordan Peterson's mind or Ethan Klein's mind. And, this sort of stuff has alienated loads of people like him who are in the centre. Now, one more thing I want to talk about with this podcast thing in this sort of time frame is the JonTron stuff. So JonTron was good friends with both of these guys. Like I said, JonTron actually employed Hila Klein as a video editor in New York. Both of them moved to New York. There's various videos you can find on the internet of them all hanging out. They seem to get on really well. Now, I've covered this whole debate as well, but I think it was in March 2017, Destiny had a debate with JonTron. The premise of my video was This was so bad. I can't believe he essentially got away with it. Like, in terms of literally going mask off fash, saying all these awful things about, you know, refugees, immigrants, Islam. You can watch my whole video. I break down everything, like, bit by bit, talking about how awful this stuff is, right?
Support all of the poor people, because poor whites commit a lot of crime too, disproportionately compared to wealthier whites.
That's just not true. But okay,
Wait,
you can
hold on.
say that if you want to.
Wait. You don't think that
Well,
poverty,
yeah, of course. Well, yes. Okay. In relative
terms,
to
yes.
in relative to wealthy whites, yes.
Sure.
You're correct.
Okay, so do you think that poor blacks probably commit more crime relative to wealthier black people?
They do. Wealthy blacks also commit more crime than poor whites. That's a fact.
Wait, what?
Yeah, look it up.
And Ethan Klein, being his friend, did watch this, but then they got him on the podcast months later after he had a little break after all the backlash. And he just let JonTron sort of like explain himself. And Ethan kind of like downplays what JonTron did, which obviously I don't downplay because I thought what he said was absolutely gross. And basically he's talking about, you know, trying to be civil and disagree with some of the stuff he said, but not hate the person.
I'm sure people want to know about this, so I just get it out of the way. Because I haven't talked about it since then, for good reason. I don't really want to get into this. It's a minefield of sorts. I'm not going to go back and nitpick everything I said and say, and qualify it or anything. All I'm going to say is that, yeah, in that moment, I was, you know, going into something that I needed a lot more time to prep for. I just went in guns blazing because you get a little arrogant sometimes, I guess. You think, like, I'm going to take this guy to task. But, you know, like, obviously I understand, like, why people had the reaction that they did. So, you know, I felt bad about the incident in a sense. But, like, I also just feel bad that we can't talk about these things without witch hunting each other.
Right.
Because, you know, that's basically my full statement.
Okay. I mean, do you feel like you said some things that you regret?
Yeah, I could have phrased a lot of that better.
Well, let me just say for the record, like, that I disagree with a lot of the stuff you said, you know, but I still think, like, if you genuinely feel a certain way, or some people genuinely feel a certain way, the correct way to deal with it is not to, like, prevent them from saying it.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of that.
We should be able to talk about it. Like, even if I strongly disagree, but I think that we should still be able to talk about it. I mean, I don't know. It's so tricky. Like,
it's tricky. By the way,
is it an impossible task for someone who's a fan of you? If you say something they really disagree with, is it an impossible task for them to be like, I'm trying to get in the mind. I really disagree with that. I hate what he said, but I still love him as a person and as an entertainer. I guess that's a timeless question.
I mean, it's. I don't think it's a stretch to say the current social climate's insane.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And the only way we'll ever get past it is just talking about stuff.
I'm not defending what you said. I just state again for the record, I disagree with a lot of the you said, but that's fine. Like,
but
it's
we
okay.
can still be friends.
Yeah, that's part of the problem is that people were like, I can't believe that you're still friends with John. And I'm like, why? He's the same person. Like, I love him. He's a good friend of mine. Like, we can talk about this stuff amongst each other and try to find a common ground, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's way better to have a conversation and try to understand each other. Otherwise, you just end up with these segregated groups, people who hate each other.
Yeah.
Like, you really expect me to just be like, you said something that I disagree with and I can't talk to you anymore. Like, that's how sick is that?
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that gives you a broader sense of Ethan Klein's views at this time and the views of a lot of people towards the JonTron stuff, where it's like, oh, you're being hysterical if you think that's bad. He just wasn't prepared. It doesn't matter if he wasn't prepared, because a lot of the stuff he was saying wasn't about being prepared with stats and figures. It was just his insane bigotry coming out, his personal bigotry coming out. It wasn't that Destiny schooled him, like, on numbers and figures about the economy or something. He literally just spent the whole time saying the most bigoted stuff about basically every group. So it shows you that maybe through some friendship and loyalty they have to each other, Ethan didn't want to condemn him for this, and it didn't really affect his perspective of that. But to be honest, I'll tell you right now, if any of my friends went on a big interview for, like, an hour saying this stuff, I probably would never speak to them again, to be honest, because there is no excusing what he said. And also, that tweet he made about the election in 2020 probably tells you he hasn't really changed that much. So a couple more clips I want to show you for Ethan Klein's more enlightened, centrist stage. So here's a clip in 2018 where he is defending John McCain for being, like, classy and being this guy that, is from a bygone era, because basically people were saying John McCain shouldn't be, lauded.
And rest in peace to John McCain, the last honest vestige of class. And how can a guy like that even be classy when the people he's trying to reach out to are eviscerating because it's never enough? Mm-hmm. But I think John McCain's an awesome dude, and he said in his final statement that he just wants to be remembered as someone that served his country. So he definitely will be remembered as that.
Also, I absolutely hate John McCain. Don't think he was a good guy. Awful politician, awful warmonger, the son of one of the people in charge of the Vietnam War in the late 1960s. Not a good person. Literally couldn't care less what happened to him in the end. But again, this is Ethan's stance, and it seems like with a lot of these more like left-leaning centrists, they prioritize civility. So John McCain can be just an awful guy. JonTron can be just an awful guy. Jordan Peterson, even though he likes him, can be an awful guy. But if you have a civil conversation, then that's all that matters, really. So before we get on to his changing politics, I want to quickly talk about Israel, because it is important to both of them, because Hila Klein actually served in the IDF.
And your whole family served in the military, right? Mm-hmm. How was your experience in the military?
It was okay. I didn't do anything like, I wasn't like a combative role.
Yeah, you weren't a fighter.
I wasn't a fighter.
Which is interesting, but both of them actually used to live in Israel. Now, on another podcast, they were asked to kind of like explain the situation. Now, for someone who served in the IDF and someone who lived in Israel, I don't find this the worst take ever, but I still think it comes from a point of view like both sides are bad, we in the center are good. And you can see this in the way they talk about Hamas and the Israeli right, in that they're the bad ones, but everyone in the middle just wants peace and to get on and everything like that.
East Jerusalem, that's all Arabic.
There's a lot of places where you see everyone coexisting.
But
right.
The problem is the extremes on both sides. The Orthodox Jewish people
And the
cause
extreme
trouble,
yeah.
and the terrorists.
Yeah.
Well,
who do all the attacks on the other side, they cause the trouble. Yeah. But I feel like if you ask most people, especially my age, they'll be like, just do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
The two-state solution. Do whatever it takes. I mean.
And I was saying that's why the reason I left is because I'm like, this isn't my fight, and Hila, I think since before she knew, thought it wasn't her fight. She never belonged there. And it's like, I don't really want to be involved in this, because when you live in Israel, you start to learn things, or maybe I don't know if it's a brainwashing thing, or you're with the club, right? You're with that tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it gets through to you.
Yeah.
So before I went to Israel, I was very pro-Palestinian, because I went to a very liberal college. I went to UC Santa Cruz. But when you go there and then you learn, because you spend time with that tribe and you understand all their talking points and it's just so confusing, dude.
Now, he even says in the video that he used to be like really pro-Palestinian in college, and like before he went to Israel and met people in Israel and everything like that. So, like I said, I don't think it's necessarily a great take, but it kind of goes in line with his politics about being this like left-leaning centrist, and like the extremes on both sides are ruining everything, and everyone has the same amount of fault on both sides. Also, I don't expect him probably to get into this in this podcast. Also kind of ignores how Israel helped Hamas thrive to divide the secular Palestinians. Also Hamas winning an election in Gaza itself because of people's dissatisfaction with more secular elements in Gaza. Even some Palestinian Christians voted for Hamas. So tells you everything you want to know about how a lot of people felt about them at the time. But just because I can't find a place to put this in the rest of the video, Ethan Klein has changed a lot politically, and he has, this statement in May about his thoughts on Palestine and Israel. So he wrote, "The Israeli government is making me sick. Even if Hamas is operating out of a civilian building, it doesn't justify the total destruction of that building. It's inhumane. Netanyahu is a piece of S. Warmonger and needs to go. As a dual citizen, I love Israel and the Israeli people. They deserve a government that actually believes in peace and not force and violence. The ultra-right Jewish settlers are among the greatest provocateurs in the world. They are shameless and hateful, fueled by religious zeal and enabled by the Israeli government. I wish the settling and repossession of Palestinian land would stop. I wish the bombing in Gaza would stop. Gazans deserve to live a life free of fear. For all the crimes Hamas has committed, we must always remember they are not Palestine. The Israeli government holds all the power, and it is on them to stop the violence and show a true willingness for peace." Compare that to some other, Israelis and other takes you've seen on social media. I think of Carly Chaikin from Mr. Robot fame actually supporting the Israeli government, taking out the AP building, everything like that. Not the worst. Still kind of in line with like the centrist views, but maybe because it's a more complex situation there. But okay, now we want to talk about the political evolution. So to a lot of people now, especially if you've only known him recently, Ethan Klein seems fairly like left-wing. Like he always has been left-wing. He has a podcast with Hasan Piker, one of the biggest left-wing Twitch streamers. But when you look through his content, it's kind of hard to pin down where he specifically pivoted. He seems to have always been like fairly progressive. Like they liked Bernie Sanders previously and in 2020, both of them. But for me, where he actually admits he's changing and where it seems he's changed a lot is a video he made on the 6th of June 2020 where he talks about his own experience with the police in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests after what happened to George Floyd. So I'm going to show you a couple clips from this where he talks about, you know, his own experience with police, how he feels about like all lives matter, and how he says he is changing as well.
When I was 16 years old, I had my first encounter with a police officer. I was drinking underage. I was drinking a beer on the beach, walking with a friend. And the officer, when he shined his bright light on us, I panicked and threw the beer in the bush, hoping he wouldn't see it. Of course, he did. He approached us and he said, "Why did you throw your beer in the bush?" And I said, "Well, I was trying to hide it." He said, "Grab the beer, pour it out, and just be on your way." And I thought, man, I really dodged a bullet. You know, drinking underage you can get in a lot of trouble for that. And I thought, hey, cops are pretty cool. My second encounter with an officer was when I was 19 years old. So when the cop pulled me over, I freaked out. I panicked. I pulled off on the next exit. I drove for a moment looking for the next exit, went off the exit, drove for about 5 minutes into the parking lot of a fast food restaurant, which now I understand is a very shady thing to do because you're just supposed to pull over on the shoulder. He took my license. He walked back to his car. He came back a minute later and he said, "Sir, next time you get pulled over, pull over into the shoulder so that you don't concern the officer." And I said, "Thank you very much." And he let me go. And I walked away thinking, man, you know, cops are really thoughtful, nice. I've had great experience with the police. But now I find myself wondering, if the color of my skin was different, how would those two situations have played out? George Floyd spent a counterfeit $20 bill and the police were called on him. And by all means, he probably didn't even know that the $20 was counterfeit. And I recently found out that young black children get a talking to from their parents like the birds and the bees, but about the police. They teach their kids that the police are dangerous and you have to be overly respectful and overly cautious when dealing with the police because they're dangerous. That's a talking to that all black children get, I learned. And that just blew my mind. I never even thought about that. I don't think my parents even entertained the notion of having such a conversation with me. When people say Black Lives Matter, it blows my mind when I see people respond with all lives matter. Because that's what they're saying. They're saying all lives matter. They're saying black lives also matter. And I stand before you as a hypocrite, as somebody who has not always been on the right side of racial issues. I've said the N-word on my podcast, and I thought I used it in a context that made it okay. I look back on those clips with just embarrassment and shame. But sometimes a hypocrite is just a man in the process of changing. And I don't think that it's ever too late to change for the better.
So if you compare that to the first video I showed you, it's clear there's a stark difference. And even him saying like he didn't realize that black parents had to have the talk with black children, which is something I thought was fairly well known, is interesting, but shows maybe how naive he was to that stuff. And this shows a lot of his change. And at the end, of course, he says he is changing, and, you know, from the start, kind of being wishy-washy on Black Lives Matter to coming down and criticizing all lives matter properly, I think is a really, really interesting revolution. And I think with a lot of people, this event seems to have been like a wake-up moment, because even with the Hunter Avalone video, it seems around about this time as well, he started changing a lot more, because he made a lot of videos about this event specifically as well. And he seems to have changed his views on the police, on like, you know, African Americans, oppression in America and everything like that, a lot because of this one event. And I feel like this happened across America. And these guys, you know, Hunter Avalone's younger than me, Ethan Klein's a fair bit older than me, but I think this event was so shocking that to a lot of people it finally woke them up. You guys will say they probably should have been woken up before, and that's fair enough, but again, I think for a lot of people they just needed to see this as clearly as possible. Now, in terms of like political content, Ethan Klein has made like this content nuke series on Keemstar and the Quartering, which of course you can look at that from like an anti-right-wing angle, but it's more like their personalities more. But also he followed up this police video with a podcast where he talked about all of this stuff, and I think this is really interesting in outlining how much he's changed. So I want to maybe give a bit more focus onto this specific podcast. So the 14th of June 2020. So he makes a video about defunding the police, All Lives Matter, and Candace Owens. So very interesting. He first calls All Lives Matter racist, which is a big change from before.
So All Lives Matter is honestly, I would say, at best, it's extremely ignorant and rude and dismissive, and at worst, it's just straight up racist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it really means. All lives matter. It's just ignorant. Don't come at me and say all lives matter. That has nothing to do with what they're saying anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, all lives matter. That has nothing to do with what they're saying. They're not saying all lives don't matter. They're saying we as black people have problems that we need to talk about.
They're saying they would like to get to the point that where all lives matter, but we're not there.
It's just like it's just an awful argument.
But also it's really interesting. He comes out in favor of defunding the police, explains what that means and how it's such a waste, especially in LA, for example, to give so many billions of dollars to militarizing the police every single year while underfunding so much other stuff.
And then the other argument, so people are saying, let's defund the police. I got to say, I'm for it. Minneapolis, where this crime originally happened, the city council voted to defund the police. Now, what does it mean to defund the police? What that means is to move the budget around. The police budget is enormous. For example, here in Los Angeles, the proposed budget out of a $10 billion general fund, $3.1 billion is going to the LAPD. So people are asking, and rightfully so, why do we keep investing and heavily in policing? We are militarizing the police. We are arming our police to the teeth. Why are we putting money here and not putting money in communities and schools and social services and housing for the poor? If you invest there, then you don't need the police. They're saying there's a better, different way to do this. And I have to agree with them.
Yeah.
I have to agree.
I also like how they go on to talk about how Bill Clinton and Joe Biden both had a role in this stuff as well with the crime bill.
Bill Clinton wanted to win. He had to do this whole policy of going really hard on police funding. I'm not that well informed on what exactly he did, but
Bill Clinton actually,
he kind of made it way worse.
Yeah, Bill Clinton.
And you know who the architect of that bill was?
Go ahead, Dan.
Joe Biden.
Oh, Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Our current nominee.
And he ends this little clip saying that the money should, of course, be spent better in other ways, and the police should not be called on everything because they're so militarized, they're just going to cause trouble whenever they show up.
Instead of uplifting them, the same money that could uplift them is going to money to punish and police them. It's crazy. I'm not saying get rid of the police entirely. You keep a force that's dedicated to violent crimes. Shootings, violent crimes, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the police should be. That's what they should be doing. But if you get a call about someone who's making lots of noise or a nonviolent offense or yada, 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 you don't need armed police stormtroopers showing up.
So to me, that shows like a big evolution in terms of like he was wishy-washy kind of at the start, then he was more like enlightened centrist of his politics, and then it's firmly coming down on the side of more left-wing causes. He has actually got loads of pushback for this from his audience because it makes sense that if you cultivate your audience based on more like edgy humor while collabing with like JonTron, iDubbbz, PewDiePie, for example, the types of people you're going to get into your audience are pretty much not going to be left-wingers. At most, they're going to be centrist, but probably edgy centrist. So I guess it's good to see someone taking this stance, which is like more unpopular, because they've cultivated their audience on, I guess, being less political, but of course not being openly left-wing about this stuff. So go have a look at some of these videos about defunding the police, about his experience with police himself, and then look at the dislikes, because a lot of them have far more dislikes than likes, which I think is pretty telling of how his audience used to be. So now I want to move on to 2021, where he's kind of like, you know, moved completely away from saying he won't talk about politics to pretty much going out of his way to talk about politics. And he's actually behind one of my favourite moments of 2021, at least online, and that is, of course, the Steven Crowder prank. You guys probably remember this, but if you don't, basically what happened is I believe Steven Crowder reached out to Ethan Klein for a debate on political issues and stuff like that. But Steven Crowder and a lot of other right-wingers have historically been dodging Sam Seder as someone who's offered to debate these people because he's confident that he will make them look ridiculous. So what Ethan Klein did was manage to trick Steven Crowder into coming into the debate and then bringing Sam Seder forward. And it's actually quite funny because Steven Crowder seemed to suspect that this was happening, but then they still got him anyway.
I get a DM from Ethan, like a week later or something like that. And he says, hey, Steven Crowder wants to debate me. And he's like, I don't do a political show. He's like, I think you should come on and debate him as I'm, on with him. And I was like, I would love to do that.
Even, do you know that the Spartans are like practice man love with children?
Oh, geez. Okay, so this is what's going to happen. What did I tell you? He was going to do anything he could to avoid. Oh, there he is. Oh no, Sam Seder. What a nightmare. I had no idea this was going to happen. I thought Ethan was a stand-up guy. This is where we are. Yeah, I told Dave, remember I told you? I said, I guarantee you he's going to do anything he can to avoid the debate.
Well, I just think he believes that he should debate you.
No, he doesn't. He just takes advantage of women with, mental health issues. Ethan Klein doesn't stand up and do his own fighting.
I gotta say,
it's just hilarious. Let's bring on FM.
You would do anything to avoid talking to me. I think the point that you made
at
at
the beginning of
Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
Joe Rogan and Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson and Noam Chomsky and Sam Harris. Everyone's been avoiding.
And not just attempting to get your audience by jumping in. Want to do it?
Let's have the
Sam,
debate.
come on. I'll tell you what. I have a general.
This is a
rule.
great opportunity.
I don't start a debate based with people on a lie. And how about you get
sabotaging?
How about you get
Stephen,
to
show yourself, you coward. Stephen, show yourself. Don't show your co-host.
Ethan, you should show yourself.
Ethan, how can you respect yourself as a man, brother?
Steven, you are such a coward. Stop showing your little leprechaun co-host who comes out dressed like your sidekick.
Come on, Ethan, why do you have to bring on a
Show
guy
Steven.
Don't hide behind the glasses.
Don't be a coward.
Don't say let's debate, Ethan. You've lost
Debate the issues. What does it matter who you debate, coward?
All right, good. You guys are good. Thank you.
Coward.
Won't even take off the glasses.
I was right.
All right, yeah, you can give me the X.
You run away twice. Cold feet again.
Come on, Steven.
Wow. Wow. Dude, I can't believe he admit to following.
He admitted that he followed the show last week.
We got him.
He admitted that he watched the show last week.
We got him.
So that was so funny when it happened, and it exposed Steven Crowder for being like this total coward, just running away with his tail between his legs. But even on the mainstream podcast with Hila, he would start to talk about politics now. So they talk about Tim Pool's reaction to this stuff and start criticizing Tim Pool. Of course, lots of us left-wingers love to criticize how awful Tim Pool is.
This guy, Tim Pool, who was a right-wing commentator, who got so heated up. By the way, is the thing we prepared ready?
Yes.
Okay, good. He got so heated up about this. You got to see this. He's so angry at me. He's so angry.
Allow that.
And it's just too funny not to watch. So this is Tim Pool addressing me with the debate.
Ethan
here.
and the content he makes is drama pop culture, like I said.
And when he weighs into political spaces, it's actually very damaging to our discourse. Not saying that he's not allowed to. I'm not saying that he should stop. I'm just saying it does cause damage. Same is true for me or anybody else. However, there's political ideology.
No, dude, the Rees coming off this, I just find that it's so ironic.
Could you be any more crybaby
Just
than
wait,
that?
bro. So he had like a whole thing where he was melting down over Sam Cedar. We just cut it out, and when he's specifically talking about me. But it's just so funny that they talk about cancel culture and Rees and snowflakes. The most sensitive man I have ever met.
So at this point, most of the H3 channels just don't care and they talk about politics. But you guys probably now know there's now a new home on their channels for this stuff, and it's a new podcast with Hasan. So Hasan went on their main podcast back in, I think, August 2020, and they had a good conversation about like Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, American politics and things like that. But now they both host the Leftovers podcast, and basically the goal of this is to not talk about specifically political philosophy or policy. It's made like a political show to, I guess, criticize other right-wing YouTubers or just ridiculous stuff going on in, I guess, the online world.
The H3 family and our $3 million set. We spared no expense. Hasan Piker.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'm ready to. Okay.
We plugged you too. Go ahead, show us his socials again.
I'm ready to.
See that?
Oh, look
plug
at that!
For you.
Hell yeah! I'm ready to. I'm ready to bring the patriotic voice to this.
That's what
this godless channel.
Thank you. Hey, come on.
That's what I'm here for.
What is the Leftovers? Listen, I've had enough of you guys complaining that you don't want me to talk about politics, so I went and made a whole show about it. But the spirit of this show is not serious policy debate. It is bringing righteous justice to these bags. That's it.
Okay.
Just clowning on idiots.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. I mean, that's what I do regularly. So when you hit me up, I mean, when we did that original podcast, your podcast, I was like, is this a thing? Like, are we vibing right now?
Right.
And, and then after that, we covered the Gamba stuff, and I was like, okay, we're vibing. We're vibing pretty hard.
So collabing with someone like Hasan, who is so explicitly political on so many things, has given his opinion on so many things, that people would, of course, say is highly controversial, advocates for more like socialist politics and stuff like that. There's no hiding Ethan and Hila Klein's politics anymore. And it's a very interesting shift in that they were trying to be like this more apolitical comedy channel. Then with the podcast stuff, they were becoming more political, but trying to stay in the center. And then with, of course, the Black Lives Matter stuff, it seems like that inspired quite a drastic shift. Now, I'm not saying Ethan Klein wasn't always fairly progressive, but he struck me as one of those center-left anti-SJW types that seemed to be so common during the Trump era. But now we've seen how like messed up the world is getting and like what is happening to countries like America, the UK. It feels like you finally have to just take a side. And thankfully for people like him, they've probably seen that the left-wing side aren't hysterical reactionaries trying to censor your free speech by advocating for tolerance. They're just people who want to, I guess, advance society and make it better for all of us to live in. So I will say in general, the worst thing people like Ethan Klein have done is like promote people like Jordan Peterson, like even making him seem friendly with like vaping on his show and stuff like that.
Fat rips. Nice. You're good. Yeah, you get it. Damn, you know how to keep it in. That's
and promoting other people who have like extremely toxic views, in my opinion, and most of them obviously lean to the right as well. But then it's just interesting to see how he slowly shifted and now his content is explicitly political. Could you even consider him a part of BreadTube? I don't even know at this point. Probably could, because he's collabing with Hasan. But I guess he's changed for the better. Very, very different from someone like Hunter Avallone, who literally just shifted completely from the political spectrum. Because I feel like with Ethan Klein and Hila Klein, the progressivism has always been there. But I think it's just for them working out where they stand on a lot of things. Like even he said to Jordan Peterson, I feel like I'm being pushed away from the left But I'm guessing he doesn't feel that anymore with people like Hasan. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the video. Is there anyone else you want me to do as part of this series? I think we have a couple videos on this. If you want to follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram, come join our communities on Discord and my subreddit in the description. If you want to support my work, please consider becoming a patron. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.